All right. Good morning. This is 7:38. There's Jade. Good morning, Jade. Everybody's with us now. Let's do a little housekeeping to start with to see where we are. This concludes week 7. You're at home this week. We Zoom case study 16A today. Next week, we'll be face-to-face. Saturday and Sunday, I'm guessing we'll be in room 107 again. There next to my office on the corner coming in on the bottom. We'll have breakfast and get started next Saturday morning. The following week is the spring break week. And then you should be in discussion board now with Miriam with your qualitative work. If you're following along with Sal Kind, of course, that's optional. You can see it's in light blue. That's where you would be. Chapters 9 through 12, working through the calculus. We'll be back online again on March the 30th at 9 a.m. Our case study data gathering. The following week, you'll be at home. You'll be working. You should be to AIRS by then with Super Crunchers. Has anybody gotten to AIRS yet? That's the only fun part in this course for you. Y'all need to get to that. That's one of the more enjoyable things that you'll do is read or listen to AIRS. He's a law professor at Yale. As I told you, he took over the Tiger Moms courses when she got in herself in a little political trouble. You know, the Tiger Mom, the lady that writes, that's also a law professor at Yale. She's written some books. She does kind of a comedy routine, but anyway, she's a social commentator. But you will enjoy the AIRS book. And then the following week, home again. But we'll be doing on Saturday morning the 13th. We'll be doing the case study, giving feedback. And then Easter break, and then our last face-to-face is on campus April 27 and 28. And then the last 2 weeks, you have discussion board on the Davenport book, keeping up with the quants. And then the final week, you just get everything done. All right, any questions on the schedule going forward? Again, we're finishing up week 7. You should be on the required work and discussion board. You should be in Miriam now, working on qualitative. All right. We'll get out of that. Milestone 6, since you're my consultancy. Again, milestone 6 is just basically methodology this semester, figuring out what you're going to do quantitative and qualitatively. If you need to Zoom with me, David and I Zoomed last week. If you need to Zoom with me, just let me know. I'm available most Wednesdays. See, I have class on Tuesday and some Thursday. I'm available on Monday nights, Wednesday nights if you need to. And, of course, I'm available in the afternoons. Most meetings are in the morning on campus. So if you have an afternoon, you need to give me a holler. I can find some time for you, no problem. Monday night, Wednesday night, if you want to talk about methodology. Of course, we know we have 3 things due this semester, our quantitative, qualitative, and our project. Any questions on those? They all feed into milestone 6. All right. I think that's all of our housekeeping this morning. So I guess we're ready to start with.
Hey, Dr. Lane?
Yes.
Maybe you mentioned this before I got on, but I just wanted to ask, when we meet next, we'll be spending a good bit of time maybe on the consultancy portion that's due this semester?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we'll devote a good bit of that time to working on consultancy. And so that's why if you what I'm hoping is you'll have a rough outline. By that time, you'll have gone through qualitative and quantitative, the Sal Kind book and the Miriam book, and you'll have a good idea of your methodology. what direction to go, and we'll sit and work on those individually because that informs the entire group. There's a lot of good things that come out of that. We'll start the practical application of what we've been learning next time through your consultancy. That's exactly right.
Okay.
And hopefully,
because I could use some time like that.
Yeah. And by the time we leave that weekend, we should have our methodology pretty much sewed up, because we'll have been through the learning curve part of quantitative and qualitative, and then we'll try to spend some time in a practical application of putting that together.
Okay.
That's the only good part of having to be with me for a whole weekend. We'll get that done. But yes, that's what we'll do next time. We'll work on consultancy. All right. So, who's gonna be our host this morning?
I think I will.
David's gonna be our host this morning. All right. I'm gonna make David the host. Yes, I'm gonna stop my share, and I'm gonna turn my video off. And that'll give you the opportunity to become the host.
All right. So what do I need to do from there, Dr. Lamb?
Go to share on your little dashboard there, and it will start sharing your screen in about 3, 2, 1, go. I can turn my video back on now.
Okay. Case 16A is on team diagnosis and intervention. And we didn't have really a background to this one per se. We were essentially told to work to serve as the consultant on this. So this is a case that's different than other ones that we've had. We really didn't have any background specifics to it, just data set.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't exactly pulling up like it's supposed to. Here at the top, it says team survey, quantitative and qualitative is how it was laid out in the case. And what we have is the data that's provided to us. So we essentially had a Likert scale, which went from strongly disagree, which was scored as a 1 by the team. We provided team data. So there was a group of 12 members on the team that provided survey data. And of the 12 members, they answered a total of 11 questions. And of the 11 questions, it was scored based off of a Likert scale from strongly disagree being a 1 to strongly agree being a 5. So the first question that was posed to the team was the mission of the team is clear, and that was scored as a total average of 3.8, with you see 4 being agreeing and 4 strongly disagreeing, while 2 disagreeing and 2 was right in the middle ground of neither agreeing or disagreeing. So that was the process that took place for 11 questions. So we see the mission of the team is clear, scored at 3.8 as a mean. The second one, I have a clear understanding of my role in this team, scored as a 4.0. Number 3, I know how my team contributes to the organization's goals, scored as a 4.3, which was a high score. Number 4, considering everything, I'm satisfied with my job, scored as overall 3.3. Number 5, I'm proud to be a member of this team, scored as a 3.0. Our team meetings are effective, scored at 3.5. Number 7, our team decision-making practices are effective, scored at 3.9. Number 8, the goals for the team are clear, scored as a 4.1. And then we got into some of the lower scores here in the last set of questions. Number 9, team members handle conflicts openly, scores the second lowest score. That scored as a 2.7, with 2 members disagreeing, strongly disagreeing, and 3 disagreeing, and 5 being in a neutral position. Number 10, team members share important information with each other as when necessary, scores a 3.4 as a mean. And number 11, team members encouraged each other to do their best, scored the worst. That scored as only three disagreed strongly, 3 disagreed, 4 were neither agreeing nor disagreeing, and only 2 agreed with that, with none strongly agreeing. So that was the lowest of the 11 points in the survey of the team. Then the team were also asked open-ended questions about anything they wanted to add. And one of them said, I would say that we are a high-performing team and consistently achieve our team goals and are always on the top. Another said that this is a fine team to be on if you're a member of John's inner circle, otherwise you would be ignored. So we get into kind of this cliquish attitude in that answer. Another response was, we don't support each other as a team. I don't think anyone here has my back if I'm struggling. And to be honest, I don't trust a single one of them. Another comment, we wait until John makes decisions and announces them rather than taking the initiative. I would like to see us making more decisions by consensus. Another comment, John's been a great leader of the team. I think we have great potential, but some negative numbers of the team bring us down in meetings with pessimistic attitudes. Further comment was, I wish I knew more about what the other members of the team were doing. We have some updates in staff meetings, but they're too brief to get much into detail. And then the last comment, which almost could be a summary of them all, the team is cliquish. This is a core group of them that excludes the rest of us. So we see a lot of the attitude there in those statements go back to numbers 9 and 11 about team members with conflicts and encouraging each other to do their best. They certainly are not cohesive in their attitudes and don't seem to show a lot of trust and faith in other members of the team. And that's what we were given as the basic information in the data set. And then from there, we worked towards data analysis.
So what we did was a descriptive statistical analysis based on the data that we received. We can see here from the histogram that there's in the normal distribution here, there's a left skewed distribution with a value of a skewness with a value of negative 0.5176. That means that the mean is to the left of the median, or the median is greater than the mean in this case here. We had a sample size of 11, and the mean ended up being 3.491, the average responses, and the median, and you'll see down below, is right the value that's in the middle, which is 3.5, causing the left skewed. Standard deviation here is 0.604077. That's one standard deviation, and it means that 68% of the values could fall within plus or minus 1 standard deviation. And we talked about how 95% of the values could fall between plus or minus 2 standard deviation. And then we have 99.7% could fall within plus or minus 3 standard deviation. We have a range of 1.9, which is the difference between the highest and the lowest value. The minimum value here is 2.4. The 25% percentile or quartile 1 is 3. That's the value in the middle at 25%. And then there's the 50% median value there. And the 75 percentile as well is 4. And that's the value in the middle of the upper part of the data set. The maximum value is 4.3. We ended up with a 95% confidence interval mean, which means that the mean could fall between 3.09 to 3.90. And it does not have any significance there. And then you have a 95% confidence interval sigma value, or the standard deviation, which means the standard deviation could fall between 0.42 to 1.06 with no significance there. There's an alpha value of 0.05 there as well. And I think that was it on that data set.
Okay, so we started answering the questions that were in the beginning of the case study. So the first one is, what do you believe to be happening on this team? What do team members say they are the team's strengths, areas of improvement, and then how would you prioritize? So we think a lot of things that are going on with this team revolve around conflict. There is a lack of leadership, and we're going to talk more about that in a minute. And then team dynamics, working well with each other, being inclusive. Okay. So strengths, They seem to be very goal oriented. They know their goals, they know their roles, they have clear roles. Everyone seems to be contributing to the team. Areas for improvement, we put leadership here because I think it depends on who you are. Leadership may be a strength for some people on that team. If they're in with John, I think is the leader. If they're in his group, then they may think his leadership's great. But on the other side, people who aren't in his group may think his leadership's poor. Either way, he needs some leadership training. Team building is a definite for this group. They need to have some conflict management, and they need to know how to support coworkers and their leader. So question 2, how would you present this data in a team feedback session? So first off, explain the objectives of the survey. What did we hope to accomplish? And I think we all can relate to this. We take surveys all the time and we have no clue why. Why are we even doing this? So I think putting that out there and saying we took this survey so we can accomplish A, B, and C. And then overview of key findings. I think starting with strengths are better, areas that scored high, things that are going well, and then move on to areas of improvement. The next step is getting the employees engaged when deciding on areas of focus. So getting ideas from the group, having their voices heard to create that plan. So then you're going to create the plan with employee feedback. So this is more difficult to do in a large organization, but as we said, this is very small. So really you can hear everybody's feedback and make that plan.
Question number 3, what team development interventions would you recommend? Design an intervention plan, including an agenda, timeline, and any activities you suggest. So the plan should be based on the 2 lowest responses, which the team members handle conflicts openly, and then team members encourage each other to do their best. And I have some of the same quotes there that David's already pointed out, that there seems to be a disconnect, and maybe there's two pieces to this group. There's John's team, and then there's others. There's definitely a lack of trust within the group, and again, going back to this idea that maybe they're just they're cliques that need to be brought together. So some techniques and possible exercises. So a role analysis technique. It's an intervention designed to clarify the roles and expectations of team members and to improve effectiveness. And it seems like this group has it together in terms of like the big idea of the organization, like what's the mission and the vision of the organization, but maybe they just haven't drilled down to the individual pieces and how this group or their team relates to that. And a different, the second one here would be a role negotiation technique. Intervenes directly in the relationship of power, authority, and influence. And you could see that directly with this, with their notes that they believe that John, as long as you are part of John's team, then you're going to be, maybe there's some double standards there. So an issue diagnosis, individuals think about how their own effectiveness can be improved if others change their work behaviors. And then the influence trade, discussions about the most important behavior changes they want from others. And then the flip side of that is also the individual has to stop and think, well, what changes am I willing to make as well? Responsibility charting, technique for improving team functioning, helps clarify who is responsible for what on various decisions and actions. And it seems like there's people, other people, especially those that maybe aren't involved or part of John's inner circle, that would really like to be able to be more part of the decision making and making some actions as it relates to how the team is functioning. And then another technique is visioning, get the group members to develop or describe their vision of what their group, and then I put organization in parentheses there, to look like in the future, but I think it really needs to be centered around what they want their group to be. And then a force field analysis, forces initiating change. You have driving forces versus resisting forces. When driving forces are stronger than resisting forces, then the status quo or equilibrium will change. The driving forces make change attractive to people. Resisting forces work to keep things together. you may find that John and John's team could possibly be the resisting force, because if what the data is revealing is John and his portion of the team are probably pretty happy. Driving forces make change attractive to people. Restraining forces work to keep things as they are. Successful change is achieved by either strengthening the driving forces or weakening the restraining forces. And it kind of goes back to our previous class with Dr. Jones and the Lewin 3 stages of change: freezing, unfreezing, and then the U continuing to move towards change. And some steps that were provided there: define the change that you want to see, brainstorm or mind map the driving forces, brainstorm or mind map the restraining forces, evaluate the driving and restraining forces, review the forces, strategize, and then prioritize your action steps for that. And the ordered process would seem that you would begin with visioning, then some of the role analysis, the role negotiation, and responsibility charting. Some of those techniques probably would be rolled in together. Those are areas that you would work on at the same time. And then the last step would be some of the force field analysis. And this is probably going to be best achieved with a combination of individual and group work. And the groups, probably you would have small group work as well as large group work. And the initial work would be individually speaking, specifically to the idea of visioning, because each individual team member is going to have their own vision. And then come together as a group, and after sharing individually, build consensus around what the group would like for the vision to be for their group. There will be some homework aspects individually and steps to implement as a team with a report back on progress. It's maybe like a 3 to 6 month intensive process with timely follow-up and tune-up sessions. And of course, there would be a designated time to meet weekly as a group, and maybe retake the survey, discuss the results, and then see what kind of progress has been made.
Okay, so lessons learned. One of the things is the uniqueness of a small team. So this data is from 12 people. So a 12-member team is relatively small, and there are some unique characteristics. And this is from an article that we thought was kind of interesting. Some things that happen in a small team: you can take your teammates for granted. You have personalities that clash. And if that's in a big workplace, that might not be as big a deal. But when you're with a small team, that could really hurt morale and snowball. People are harder to replace. You share too much of the work, and there's too much to do and not enough time. So some of the resolutions, which mirror some of the stuff Jay talked about: acknowledgement and appreciation. And that was the lowest average on the survey. Team members encourage others to do their best. That was the one that was, I think it was 2.7. So that acknowledgement piece and appreciation piece is something that's definitely lacking with this team. Document all organizational knowledge. And I think this is really important, because if in a small team, one person leaves and they are the holder of that knowledge, and I think we've talked about this in class before, they're gone. So they have, they almost feel like they're irreplaceable. They're not telling people what they know, so they have to stay. So document everything. Document all the organizational knowledge. Have processes in place for common project management tasks. Everyone should know what's going on. Clear communication. Organize the work responsibilities, and prioritize, systemize, which is standardizing what's going on. Next, David. Okay, so it is a divided team. And Jessica said it depends on, you think John is great if you're in that half. If you're in the other half, you don't think so. So there is a divided team. About 2/3 feeling like things are fine, and about 1/3 feeling the opposite. So acknowledge the conflict. Hear from all sides. And this was a question for Dr. Lamb. We have the survey results. Do we need to get something else? So everything we've talked about so far is, here's the survey results and we're going forward. Should we interview, there are only 12 people. Should we interview each of those people? They had an opportunity to provide feedback on the survey with some open-ended questions, but should we do something else as well, or do we just take that one survey? Identify the issue, leadership, the lack of belongingness and teamwork due to the cliques and unclear purpose, and all of these things are leading to the ineffectiveness. Create one strong team using active, a lot of times when people talk about teamwork activities, sometimes that's passive. So the active teamwork activities on all the issues, and I've got here below 4, and probably not below 4. The mean was 3.5. I think it was 3.4, 9 or something. So I don't know if they'd mentioned the 2 that were the lowest and to focus on those. So, that's kind of a question too. Do you just focus on the 2 that are lowest? Do you focus on anything that's below the mean? Next, David. And then the identified team development interventions needed for this case are definitely leadership training, which should probably happen first. Jim needs leadership training, specifically on group dynamics and how to lead effective meetings. And once that's once that has occurred, Jim can be pulled back in on the team building activities, the communication and conflict management, the mission and values, the policies and procedures, and roles and responsibilities. So those 3 things that are listed there can be done with all of those interventions that Jade talked about. And she said, some intense 3 to 6 months, individual, she mentioned individual versus group stuff, all going back to these 3 things. And that's it for our case.
Okay. All right. Excellent job on David. Stay online for me, David. We're going to work through these and go back to the start.
Okay.
Go to your survey results. So, in terms of 736 strategic planning and analysis, you have fleshed it out perfectly. All the things that you've done, you've hit all the notes. Dr. Jones did a good job with you. Excellent. Obviously, I've not done a good job because you missed the main point of this one. This case, because it has no background, the reason why it has no background is to not distract you. This is about methodology. This case is about methodology. It's mixed methods. They did a quantitative piece and a qualitative piece. The quantitative piece is the survey. The qualitative piece was the open-ended questions. The data doesn't match. The data doesn't match due to intentional, I suspect, poor methodology. Where is the methodology bad in these 2 pieces? I'll give you a hint. It's in the quantitative and the survey piece. Where's the methodology bad? You got it right. You got the case right and all your recommendations, and you recognize that there was 2 teams, but it's not 2/3 and 1/3. It's actually half and half, and your data tells you that. What's wrong with their Likert scale?
Because they put the neither agree nor disagree.
And so which do those go with? They're with the dissatisfied half. So your numbers, your analysis, because they should have used a 4-point scale to force a either or, but they didn't. He left a 5-point scale. When we don't really want to know, I've told you this, when you don't really want to know what's going on, what do? You leave people an opt-out clause. So if we took and went back through this, and everything that's on the left-hand side and the middle, we counted as naysayers, what you'd find is it's 6 and 6. There's 2 distinctive teams here. But our quantitative data doesn't show that. It shows that there's a third or less disgruntled. But if you go through and if you take and separate these, agree and disagree, and the other 3, you'll find it's half and half. So now your analysis and the plans you put in place reflected what your qualitative data told you. But your quantitative data does not tell you that. But it's probably intentional. And that's why I've said the refuge of the scoundrel is to use a 5-point Likert scale rather than a 4-point scale in methodology. This case study is about methodology. Yes, you've displayed all the things that you learned up to now in terms of your organizational skills, recommendations, those things. But this case study speaks to methodology. If you want to really find out what's going on from a survey, you have to use a 4-point scale. You have to force a decision one way or the other. I agree or I disagree. So if we went back through, what you would find is, again, that the averages, your means on each of these is much lower than it appears. And which would lead you to say, aha, there's two groups. And then when you read your qualitative piece, aha, there are two groups. Then if you move that undecided middle column, the 3, over to the disagree side, your qualitative and your quantitative now match. At this point, they don't. Generally, what happens in organizations is the leader puts the survey out because they have to, and they turn it back in and say, well, yeah, I've got a couple that are disgruntled. When in fact, you've got, as it says, you've got John's team and you've got the other team. But that speaks to your methodology. If you really want to know, the design flaw here was in the methodology, but it was probably intentional. And that's one of the things that you as the leader needs to understand. Look at the actual instrument. How was it used? Look at the methodology piece. Look at your evaluation tools. See, for me, this one isn't valid. When you're trying to get an opinion on these types of questions, the middle column blows the validity of this instrument out of the water. So if we went back and recalculated all of our means, standard deviations by counting the 3 on the left and the 2 on the right as 2 different parts, you would get a picture that looks exactly like your qualitative data. It would look exactly like the qualitative. But many times our methodology masks what's actually going on. And so if you really want to know, you have that opportunity. But if you really want to make it look better than it is, then this is what you do. This is the example. So let's go a couple more slides. Can we move a couple slides, David?
Oh, yes, sir. Where do you want to go to?
Just start through and I'll stop you.
Okay.
So as you can see, if we take the 3, we'd have 4, and then we'd have 3, and then come on down another slide.
So where you want to be in the data analysis or early?
I want you to just move through the slides. Click on slide 4 over on the left.
Okay. Let's see. I'm not seeing the 4. Let me go back up to the top. There's number 4.
You're on slide 3.
Okay. For the end of the quantitative.
No, you're still stuck on slide 3. You haven't moved. That's what we're seeing on our screen.
Okay. I'm seeing the first of the open-ended questions. Is that what everybody else?
No.
There must be some gap or lag.
No, you've got to go back to share.
Okay.
And then go to the top left and click on that one.
Is this any better this way?
No.
Okay.
No, your screen is frozen on slide 3.
Which one did you want to, which slide do you want to go to, Dr.
I
Lamb?
want to work through the slides. I want to move to slide 4 next.
Okay. Are y'all seeing that as slide 4?
So we'll tell you when you move, if and when.
Okay.
You're not sharing your desktop. Again, you're going to have to click on share on your dashboard, and you're going to have to share your desktop, which is the top left choice. It might just say screen. All right, now see if you can click on 4 over on the left to change your slide. It blipped off and came back on, but it's still on slide 3.
It changed.
There we go. Now we're back live. Very good. All right. So now as we get down through these, we start looking. You've got 5 to the, the center left. You got 5. You've got 6. You've got 4. You've got 3. Come on down to your next slide. I'm counting the total respondents. Now you've got 10 over that disagree. You've got 6. You've got 10 again. So basically, what if we went back through and changed and calculated 1s, 2s, and 3s together? The left 3 and then the 2 right 3. The strongly agree. If we considered everything not disagree from neither degree or disagree over to the left, what we'd find is, and we ran our numbers, that we're significantly lower in all of our areas, and it's pretty much a 6 and 6 situation here. Come on down to your next slide. I know I'm belaboring the point, but again, you look at the open-ended, you look at the qualitative, and so so in the end, the questions for me, let's go to those. Yes, I would resurvey the group, but I would use a 4-point scale, and then I would interview the group as a result of that and get a clearer picture of what's really going on. Come on down on your slides.
So Dr. Lamb,
Yes.
if we throw out, and I don't know if we can do this now, but if we throw out the center column, I went and ran that.
No, you can't throw it out.
Okay, so you still have to put it either on the left or on the right. Okay.
That's correct. You can't throw it out.
Okay.
How do you decide if it goes right or left?
Exactly.
We always go with disagree.
Okay.
Okay.
We always that always goes with the disagree.
Okay.
If people agree, they'll tell you. So if you encounter data that that you didn't collect that has a 5-point scale, you always move it to the disagree side, the center column. A better methodology is don't give them that option. A better force a response. Either you like it or you don't. You agree or you don't. And again, the last refuge of the scoundrel is we'll give them the opportunity to do that, and our data won't look so bad. And so it puts the thumb on the scale. But again, that's how we set up our methodology. And part of the illustration of this case, you weren't supposed to get this. You were supposed to be able to see through it and do the things that you did. Put the plan and understand that there were 2 groups. That qualitative gave you that. You should have been smart enough to pick up on it, and you were. The trick here is to understand that how you set up your methodology in many ways will will portend the results that you get. You can kind of rig your own results quantitatively through the methodology that you use. That's when you're using your power for evil rather than good. That's the whole point of this case study, to understand the importance of methodology. This semester is about methodology for your consultancy. You can set it up from an ethical standpoint and find out what's really there, or you can put your thumb on the scale and come up with what you want. It's up to you as a researcher. And that's why I told you from the very start in this course, I want to teach you to be an ethical researcher. I want you to learn the right way to do things, and the chips fall where they fall. But a lot of folks can't stand that. They it has implications for their jobs or their careers. And that's why I told you, be careful. Don't do it in your church or the place where you work in your department, because I'm going to encourage you and I'm going to require you to do ethical research. And we're going to find what we find. And it may, it may gore somebody's ox.
It looks a lot different, Dr. Lamb. I went back and
yeah, of course it does.
Yeah,
it now matches the qualitative, but we hid that. I suspect that John was the one that sent the survey, and we hid that so that it wouldn't look so bad. Yeah, we're all right. We got a couple people. We'll work with them, or we'll get a new ops. We'll change those couple people out. Everything's fine. But the qualitative tells us no, it's not fine. But we could only find that if we use the correct methodology. So one of the things that I just can't abide is that we set a survey up, or we set a study up through survey to deliver the data that we want rather than what's actually there. And this is the perfect case where the survey was set up to find what John wanted to be found rather than what was actually there. The qualitative piece told us what was really there, as you folks picked up on and did an excellent job with your plan going forward. And so, but what if you didn't have the qualitative piece that told you the real thing, what was really going on? If all you were doing was survey methodology here, and you were John's supervisor, yeah, it looks good to me, and you just move on, and you have a dysfunctional department here. This department in day-to-day operations, as you pointed out, is dysfunctional. You have two separate teams. And you know what happens when you have team implies competition. You have one department of 12 and you have two different teams. What's their natural inclination going to be? To compete against one another rather than compete against the actual competition. I know you've all been parts of organizations, either in your personal or professional life, where the people involved spent all their time fighting one another and trying to one-up one another and trying to get an advantage over one another, that they couldn't focus on the client system and the real competition of their competitors that offered the same goods or services. You can't make it organizationally if you're fighting yourself all the time. That's the lesson to be learned here from the organizational standpoint. I mean, there's several lessons to be learned from the methodology. This when he put his thumb on the scale to get what he wanted. When you go back and change and count the 3 on the left against the 2 on the right, as Bruce pointed out, your numbers are very much tells a very different story. Your statistical analysis is very different. But we set it up that way in the beginning so that we wouldn't be hurt. The first thing I do when I get survey data from the Institutional Effectiveness Office at Gardner-Webb, which they run it all by me for some reason, first thing I look to see is what did it tell us, or what did we really want from it? And so And then we have to be careful in the interpretation of that data in terms of the plan going forward. Getting the data right is the first half. That's the side that I'm most I'm most interested in as a methodologist, especially as a quantitative methodologist. I'm most interested in making sure our techniques and our ethics are good, that we use sound techniques, that we don't mix qualitative and quantitative methodologies together, because that gets it wrong. But then you have the second half is organizationally, all right, what you going to do now, hero? You've got your data. You feel confident in your data that it tells you what it tells you, and that what you find is actually there, that it is reliable, and it is valid, and you can move forward with what you're going to do there. One of the things that happens in organizations, though, is we deceive ourselves. We set data collection up so that it doesn't really tell us what's going on, or it does, but that we interpret it incorrectly in terms of what we should do, our steps going forward. You folks, your initiatives going forward were perfect because they matched the qualitative data. Let's move on through till we get to the last 3 slides, and let me kind of explain that. If I were the boss, if I were in organizational leadership, I would wonder, looking at your recommendations versus the quantitative data. Let's go on. Next slide. I would wonder why you're taking such drastic steps when your numbers don't look bad. Come on, keep going. Stop on that one. I mean, you folks are taking some pretty drastic steps here. Your recommendations are pretty drastic in relationship to what the actual numbers tell us. But if we looked at Bruce's recalculated numbers, in light of the qualitative information that we have, your plan of action going forward is exactly appropriate. You did a great job. Betsy did a really good job with you in 736. But if you simply looked at it from a quantitative perspective, your plan looks like overkill. And so, which is it? Is it the quantitative or the qualitative? Well, the qualitative is what it is, and so we go back and look at the quantitative, and, why don't they match? And then the first thing that you should figure out as the leader, as somebody who's been trained in methodology, is, if I just move this column over here, then it's a perfect match, qualitative, quantitative, and the plan going forward is perfectly appropriate. But generally what happens, people discount the qualitative. We don't have as much respect for it. We look at the numbers and say, oh, that's just too much stuff. It's just a couple people, not that big a problem. Looking at the freshman data from the freshmen that came in the fall at Gardner-Webb, and looking at SOI scores that came from them in terms of student opinion of instruction, their data was pretty good. I've been working with institutional effectiveness, and they've done away with the middle column and have students pretty much agree or disagree. And one of the things that they said about when they were collecting some of the general demographic data variables was that one of the top 5 at Gardner-Webb for undergraduates, the reason they came is for small class sizes. But at the end of the semester and on the survey and the student opinion of instructors, what were they pretty clear about in terms of instruction? They were pretty clear that even though they came to Gardner-Webb for small class sizes, that the instructors on the undergraduate liberal arts side use lecture. When is lecture appropriate for teaching classes? Usually when you're in a large lecture hall with 200 or 300 or 400 students. But when you're in a small class that only has 8, 10, or 12 undergraduates, their complaint doesn't do any good to have small class sizes if they're going to get behind the podium, stand in front and lecture anyway. And so if you'll remember, we were in 107 last time. I had to take all those little group desks that they bought and break them apart and make us an appropriate place for us to sit. But so the response to inappropriate teaching methodology was to buy new desks. I can't make this up. I'm not smart enough. They assumed if they bought desks and put students in groups that the instructors would have to do what? Change their teaching modality to a small group type teaching rather than lecture. And so I have a picture where one of the English instructors, when professors went in, she had them break all the little desks up and put them around her in a semicircle, and so she stood in front behind the podium. They were all facing her. Then I've got a picture where one, he didn't even bother to have them do that. They were sitting there with half of them with their backs to him. He was standing behind the podium lecturing. So the solution was not to change the furniture in the room. It was to do staff development. With the instructors to teach them how to teach small group methodology. Now, the data was clear. The data was good. It was clean. And the data was very clear. It said two things that stood out. We came for small class sizes. They're not teaching us like we're in small classes. That data was clear. And so we did a good job on our methodology. And we were able to interpret that they didn't like being lectured to. But then our plan going forward, because we did not want to have to actually tell people that you can't teach, or actually go in and watch them teach, or do professional development, or actually work with people, we found an easier solution. We just throw a little money at it. We'll buy a new desk. Those little triangle desks that, cut out like for me for my belly, but little triangle desks. We'll put them together, and that'll make them teach a small group. No, it won't. That's the same philosophy as putting uniforms on kids will make them act better. No, that's just kids behaving badly dressed similarly. That's the same. That's the same. And so you got to get your data right. We do quantitative and qualitative. People say, well, why do we use mixed methodology? Well, they have different perspectives, but also to make sure that we're sure that what we find is actually there. And they should match. They should tell us the same thing. If they don't, we need to start looking at our methodology. That's kind of the summary. I'm in the benediction now. You can hear Just As I Am playing in the background. If your quantitative and qualitative don't match, there's a reason why. And it's 99.9% of the time it's embedded in your methodology or lack thereof. So when you get data from a study, or when from an evaluation, and the quantitative and the qualitative don't match, there's a methodology problem. They should match, because there are checks and balances. So in this case, the first thing that should have slapped you in the face is, man, this qualitative data says that there's two different groups. Why doesn't the quantitative say that? You recognize there was two groups, but it's not 1/3. It's actually half and half. If you go back and do your numbers, the numbers will exactly match your qualitative. The quantitative will match. But again, it was a methodology issue. So when we use mixed methodology for a reason, it's a check and balances on the researcher. That's the reason why we use mixed methodology. And that's why this semester in your methodology, you have to do a quantitative and a qualitative. That will be in your study. And that's the ethical way to do research, to make sure that we're checking on ourselves. And when you interpret a study or a case study or see a study and it has qualitative and quantitative, you think, well, these people, they've started out the right way. But then you have to double check to make sure that they are the different sides of the same coin, that they're not two different things, that they agree in their findings. When qualitative and quantitative don't agree, it's a methodology problem. All right. So yes, I would follow up with a survey that was actually the right kind of survey, that was forced response, that did not give you a middle column on the Likert scale. And yes, I would follow up with interviews, because obviously there's two teams here. Now, you say, well, Dale, we've got this nice plan. Why would we do? Well, the content of what you do, and that goes back to the desk. That goes back to the desk example. Instead of following up with those freshmen to say what would be better, what could we do to alleviate this dislike you have, they just assume the thing to do is buy a desk. Going forward in this particular case study, the reason why you're going to do more survey and interviews is to figure out what's the content of your professional development going to be. You've got some really good ideas and you've got some good categories, but then you got to flesh that out. Teamwork activities, what kind of teamwork activities? That's what you would ask. What kind of things? You know, let's be specific. And then that becomes your plan, or that becomes the content that helps you develop your actual professional development plan. Just saying they're not happy, let's do some professional development, and then that portends to the question, well, what's going to be the content of what we do? You got to get down in the weeds. You can't just say professional development will fix it. What kind of professional development will fix it? They identified the problem with undergraduate instruction in the liberal arts college is that they came for small groups, but they weren't happy with the instruction. What aren't you happy with? How could we do this? What would be more appropriate way to convey content to you rather than standing in front behind the podium? Tell us, you know, and then that would have been the content of the staff development that we did with the staff. But it was just easier to buy a desk. And so now we have desks. We spent the money on desk. Instruction hasn't changed. But instead of spending our money on staff development, we don't have any money for staff development now because we have desks. Now the desks have become a barrier to actual change because we spend all of our resources on the desk. Can't make this up. I'm not smart enough. And so we took action. We collected data. We collected it ethically. We did qualitative and quantitative. We did all the things we were supposed to do. We interpreted it correctly that they weren't happy. But then the action steps that we took were those of convenience. And in the end, the buying of the desk will prevent us from having the time and resources and the money to actually fix the problem. And so when they get results at the end of this semester on the survey and they get the SOIs, do you suspect that they will have changed any? No. And so in the poorly run organization, what will their first inclination to be? To buy something else, more desk or a new projector, because we're going down that path that this is a facilities equipment issue instead of an actual instructional modality issue, because we didn't follow up and get the richness of data that we should have followed. We should have done a follow-up survey and some follow-up interviews, but we didn't do that. And so we won't be happy at the end of the semester. Our numbers will turn out bad again, and we'll our hair will be on fire as it was at the end of last semester, and we won't know why our solution didn't work. All right. And you're right. Your summary here at the bottom, you must create one strong team. You can't come to work every day and compete with your coworkers. As an organization, you won't last if that's what's going on in your workplace every day. That you've got 2 teams of 6 instead of 1 team of 12, and their impetus every day is to compete with one another. your organizational effectiveness, there is none. Questions you have for me? Again, excellent job on the 736 stuff in terms of, your analysis was excellent. It came from the qualitative piece. You did all the right things, change, the unfreezing, moving, refreezing, professional development, all those things. The question about should we do further survey and interview work? Absolutely. That's for the content of the staff development. That will inform assessment, informs instruction. That's another form of assessment that would inform the staff development or the instruction that you're going to do going forward. All that's wonderful. Just make sure you understand, if you see data sets that don't match from the same people, qualitative and quantitative, there's a problem in your methodology. That should be your first concern. And again, on 5-point Likert scales, the middle column goes with the disagree, and you can make that switch and run your numbers that way, and I'll guarantee you that then all of a sudden your qualitative and quantitative will match, as Bruce pointed out. When he reran the numbers, it's a perfect match now between qualitative and quantitative. That one little simple change in your methodology. Questions you have for me? Don't everybody talk at once. All right. Now, reflection. What did you think of this case study in light of what we've talked about today? What have you learned?
I think sometimes we take things at face value, because you talked about not having that middle column in class.
I did.
And I
specifically for this case, I gave you the clue.
Yeah, and then we just look at the data and I guess just took it at face value and went from there, looking at the solution instead of, is there a problem with what we're presenting?
Yep. I made sure
I had blinders on
thoroughly in preparation for this case. Yep. But that's what I said. The 736 part of this, the solution's perfect. It matches the actual data. But you should have picked up on question. Look at the methodology. When they send me things from institutional effectiveness, the first thing that I do, they do that so I'll poke holes in it. They send it to me to look at their methodology. Now they just hired a new young man who's a methodologist, and so hopefully Lucas will pick up and start doing some of that stuff for them. They just hired him. He's a methodologist. He's an EMR, educational measurement research person from UNC Greensboro. He got his doctorate there in EMR. Those people are few and far between. You need one of those people. You need an EMR person. We're trying to hire one. We actually interviewed one yesterday for the School of Education because, ours resigned and left. Laura Boyles, we don't have an EMR now on staff either. And so it's fallen to me to do EMR work like I don't have anything else to do. But you need somebody who's a methodologist, for validity and reliability purposes. Somebody that can poke holes or confirm that what you're doing is the right thing. You should always look at your method. When I look at a study, I don't look at the results. Most everybody, when they get a research study or a dissertation, they flip to chapter 5 or to the results page, summary, implications, conclusions, going forward. I don't. I go to chapter 3 or I go to the middle part. I look at their methodology first. That's the difference between. That's the difference between an EMR person and a non-EMR person that does educational measurement and research. I don't look at the back first. I look at the middle first and see what your methodology is. But again, and that's what you need to learn to do is question. Don't just, as Lori said, don't just accept the data set and go on about your business. Look and see their technique. Is it sound? from what you've learned, are they using reliable technique and valid technique? Reliable, did they do it the same way every time? Did they collect it the same way from everybody? Did they implement the instrumentation the same way with everybody? Look at those things, and then for validity's purpose, look at their scales, look at their, how they collected their data, look at their analysis. Question, make sure that the data is valid and reliable before you start looking at what it tells you. Because garbage in, garbage out. Make sure that you have applied the standards of reliability and validity to the data before you start looking at the outcomes or the analysis of it. Make sure it's actually clean data, and then you can move to chapter 5 or to the end, the summary conclusion. But Lori made a good point. You assume that the data is good. Don't assume the data is good. Too many people in this in the business manipulate the data. We're having a little problem right now in our society with truth and numbers being numbers and data being data, and so a lot of folks think that means it's okay to massage the numbers, or in business we call it thump the numbers, to make it come out like we want it to come out. That's become quite popular. We have a narrative that we want to try to fit, and so we make the numbers fit the narrative rather than the other way around. And that's become quite popular in a lot of different organizations that we previously had trust and faith in. We're finding that they write the narrative and then they go make the numbers fit the narrative, rather than finding the numbers and then writing the narrative from that. That's called, when you hear controlling the narrative, that's become a popular in our lexicon, controlling the narrative. That means that we write the narrative first, and then we go hunt data to support our narrative. In the scientific method, it's completely the opposite way around. We make sure our technique and methodology is above reproach, and then we write the narrative from that, good, bad, or indifferent. As the researcher, we're just interested in finding what's there. There's no value placed on, it works or it didn't work, or it's good or it's bad. We want to find what is. That's our job. And as the organizational leader, you better know what is. You can't just keep deluding yourself, or you'll go out of business. What's the number one role? I told you the first day of 7:30. What's your number one job as the leader of an organization? Told you the first day we met in 7:30. Number one job of the leader of an organization.
Keep the organization alive.
That's exactly right. And if you delude yourself on your numbers, if you write the narrative and then just try to make the numbers fit, things will not go well for you. They will not go well for your organization. There's all kind of tricks. There's scoundrels everywhere. There's all kind of tricks and techniques to make the numbers come out whether you want to. My suspicion in this case, obviously it's a fictional case, is that the whole idea of setting up the survey as it was set up was to make sure that the numbers didn't come out too bad, so that we could fit the narrative. We just got a couple of disgruntled people, we're good. But when we go back and look at it from the researcher lens, from the methodologist lens, we see that it's actually two groups of 6. And our numbers tell us that, and our qualitative work tells us that. All right. Next time we get together, we've got a data gathering one. Kind of review or think about some of the things that I told you when we were together. I made sure that just like for this one, I made sure to tell you, the last refuge of the scoundrel, on data collection is using the 5-point scale. That the middle column always goes to the negative. If you really want to know what's going on. So our next case study, our next case study on all right. You're going to actually do some role playing. And you get to pick which one of these cases you got. There are case studies 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to make sure that this is sometime confusing. So when you go back to your case study materials, you will see them right here. Case studies 3, 4, and 5. You got to go back and pick one of these. So when you read the instructions, I have people that say, we don't know what you mean. So you have the case study for data gathering here. This is the third one we're moving to. But then the content of the actual case study is that there's 3 options, case 3, 4, and 5. But they are the body of this third case study. You got to pick one of these 3 and go from there. Everybody understand how that works? All right. I've had some problems with that in the past. I just want to cover that again. Again, look for the trick. Think about the things we've talked about. Don't just assume. Look at the methodology. Look at all facets and components of it. Be a critical thinker. Be suspicious. Be a skeptic. Look hard while you're doing this. The life of your organization depends on it, and if you're a consultant, the life of your business depends upon you knowing what really is and not what people want you to think is. Don't delude yourself, but don't be deluded by others. Be a critical, independent thinker. All right. We're through 15 minutes early. It's a miracle. All right. I'll see you next weekend on campus. Everybody have a good week. I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.